And yeah, I got my thing all fixed, so we're actually back with Streamlabs this week. I had an issue where last week I couldn't we couldn't use Streamlabs, so I just streamed it from OBS. It looked okay still, considering, but I was like, I'm gonna have to make sure that I download that VOD so that I have the recording before it disappears off Twitch. Okay. Just want to make sure that we're good. I don't see.
All right, I see us live on Twitch.
Oh, okay, good. I was like, I don't see the message thing. It always pops up. It's just slacking. That's fine.
Yeah, it's just weird sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Okay, cool. Are we ready?
Ready.
Let's do it.
All right. Pull up my notes. All right. Welcome to episode 55 of the TCCG Roundtable. We're your hosts, dragonrider, DankestDad, and RonMexico. He's back this week. Welcome back. Hello. Good to have everybody here.
Hey, happy to be here. Sorry I missed last week, but well, there are no longer piping problems in my apartment for the time being, so that's good. Fingers crossed. And yeah, excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
Good to have you back.
Yeah. I know. Dankest and I were talking before you joined us, before the show, and we were like, well, hopefully it's fixed, fixed, because this is the second time now that you're things have gone bad real quick. And so, hopefully. Yeah.
This time was better than the last one. The last one, there was water leaking from the ceiling in my laundry room, and it was leaking through the light bulb, and that was disturbing. But this time was not quite as bad. It was just really, really loud and took forever to fix. So surely it's fine.
Terrifying.
Now. Yeah, no, it was. I didn't like it. Since that moment, I have a brand new bathtub and shower combo and a new laundry room ceiling and of course a new light bulb. So, it's cool.
Deeply concerned that the first place water would leak is into something electrical, but
yes, when we saw that, and we didn't have the light on when we saw it, but we're like, okay, so we took some tape and we just taped down the light switch. We're like, nobody touched this. Nobody touched this. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah. Hopefully things get better though. So we're glad to have you back. Any of us have anything going on besides disaster plumbing?
Well, I can say last week was pretty cool. I got to cast my first Universus event for Let's Talk Universes. For David Toombs, awesome creator. Look him up. But had a blast doing that, and I'm hoping I get a chance to do some more in the future.
Hell yeah. That's awesome.
Yes, it is. I know that you've done lots of Hearthstone casting in the past, so it's exciting to see getting to do a little bit more, and hopefully that continues.
Yeah, I'm hoping. I want to eventually try my hand at Pokemon, maybe Star Wars. I'm studying up, so hopefully I can get that chance someday.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I know from firsthand experience, I've casted with DankestDad before, and he's fantastic as a caster, at least in Hearthstone. So I definitely have faith that you'll do well in other areas as well.
Thanks. Yes. All right, but what about the rest of you guys? Do anything non-plumbing?
Oh no, just disaster plumbing, honestly. Not really much else on my side. I've been streaming in the meantime. Just kind of waiting for a change in Hearthstone lately. There's not really a lot that I find too exciting at the moment. And just otherwise just hoping that like things are just normal where I live and like not insane. That's enough for me for right now. So I've got smooth sailing for the last week ish, and I'm just hoping it stays that way.
Yeah. Oh man. If that last sentence doesn't just describe like my entire life, I don't know what else does. Just, it's been okay, maybe the last week, and that's
yeah.
Hopefully it stays that way. Yeah.
Ups and downs. Ups and downs.
Yeah.
Ooh. And all you want is for neither. You're like, no, we don't need to go up. We don't need to go down. Can we just level? Is it fine?
Yeah. Just neutral. Let's just cruise.
Now we're just entering the bargaining stage of grief.
Ty, you got to teach me Flesh and Blood. I see there in the comments talking about casting that. I have not seen a game of Flesh and Blood in about 27 months, and the last time I played, I think that Dash was the local meta. So you got to catch me up. I got to learn again, and I got to find half a mortgage payment to get a deck. So,
oh dear, 27 months. Wow,
it's oddly specific. Also,
he remembers it well.
I really did like it. I do think that as a rule system, Flesh and Blood is the best game. Like period. I think it's number one. Probably nice. A little too complex for mainstream appeal, but of all the card games, I think it is the probably most rewarding mechanically.
Take it with a grain of salt. This guy loved Artifact.
Well, I mean, I ranked it above Artifact, didn't I? I just said that.
That's true.
Yeah.
Because Artifact is among the many card games that did not make it. So there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
God, I love Artifact.
Also, I'm getting called out in chat. Hi, Mom. my mom's calling me out. She's like, we had a great weekend. Because I didn't bring that up. Yes, we did. My mom and I had an amazing, wonderful Saturday over the last weekend. Got to go spend a little time at our local Pride Fest event. We did we got some face painting done and checked out, just some of the different booths and stuff. Got some sweet like pride flags and some other things. And then we went and did we'd gotten tickets for a local coffee shop that had partnered with a local sweets store in town, and they were doing what they called a sip and sweets. So it was like a tasting, and they had 3 coffee drinks lined up that were kind of paired with 3 different little a little cupcake, and then a kind of like a whipped cream and fruit dessert and some other things, and then the coffees weren't labeled or anything, and we actually got to sip them, taste them, and then we got to guess what each coffee drink was made of. And they had a little contest for whoever guessed the most or guessed the closest for the coffee drinks. And one person won a gift card for the coffee shop, and then second place won a gift card for the sweet shop. And not to toot my own horn, but I took second and got the sweets gift card. So,
nice.
But that was super fun. It was fun to just go out and check out some local stuff and celebrate and just have fun and, and then go with our ridiculous, fun, painted faces and go sit in this coffee shop where there was some older ladies and stuff drinking their little coffee, and here's my mom and I, and we're like, yeah, face paint, Pride Fest, woo!
It sounds awesome.
It was fun. So yeah, that was great. And then, got home from that, and we had the Pokemon tournament that was going on. last weekend, so like, got to kind of tune in a bit while I was working on other stuff to try to cheer on our AFG players and the Disney Lorcana tournament. We'll talk about all that in a minute, but like it was nice to just be like, okay, cool. I'm gonna sit down and like watch these other gaming events that were going on. That was good. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been up to, and then just lots of homework. It feels like lots of schoolwork.
Of course.
Yeah, but that's okay. But you know what? I feel like we're getting to that point. I know we talk about this, how like there's those like ups and downs in card games, right? Where it's like it seems like all of the card games are on not exactly the same schedule, but they kind of are similar. So like sometimes we have the lulls where it's like, okay, it's all competition and like no news. Now we're in the news. Okay, like the events are wrapping up for right now and we're in the news. We're getting ready for the next stuff. So anybody want to kick off our news?
Well, I can start. So, at least for Universus, we'll go reverse alphabetical order today. We've got Attack on Titan coming around the corner. So, Godzilla cards come out next week. Very cool. We get our challenger decks, but we got to start promoting the newness. So the next booster set for Attack on Titan will be coming out in early August. And the art is from the manga and looks pretty awesome. Otherwise, going to the next game, Shadows of the Galaxy reveals continue. We got some cool new Wookiee support yesterday that looked pretty neat. And, well, I'll let Dawn revisit this one a little bit later. And yeah, I think those are the general news items there. How about for Hearthstone, Senor Mexico?
So for Hearthstone, there has been a recent patch for Battlegrounds where buddies have been brought back. So definitely a really popular mechanic that a lot of people have really enjoyed in Battlegrounds, and that is coming back with patch 29.6. Sorry, came back. It came out like yesterday, maybe. I don't play enough Battlegrounds, so I don't know to test it, but I know that I saw the announcement about it. So if you're playing BGs, you probably either have already seen it or are about to see it, whatever the case may be for you BGs enjoyers. And also, there is the Hearthstone Masters Tour has had an announcement early, which is shocking, honestly, that they like in advance told us when it's going to be. So major props to the team for giving timely notice. And we're going to have the Masters Tour take place on August 16th, I believe. Let me just double check that I have that correct. Yes, streaming live on Twitch and YouTube starting August 16th will be the Hearthstone Masters Tour Summer Championship. And we're in the midst of the qualifying season again right now. June and July ladder finishes will count for who makes it to the Summer Championship for the Masters Tour. And we know well in advance when that is going to take place. So that's exciting.
Nice. You going to go for it this time?
No. Not a chance in hell.
There was not even any hesitation there.
That is so not worth it to me. But there are plenty of players who are very good who do find it worth it, and they are going to be trying their damnedest for those ladder finishes. And we almost always get incredibly high quality of players who make it to that spot. And they put in a ton of effort, and some of them have their immense efforts rewarded. And we definitely will get to see some incredible gameplay come August. So that's something to look forward to.
Yeah, and by August, maybe they'll be playing with some new cards. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, usually.
I mean, I sure hope so. Come August.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a doom and gloom scenario if they're not.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Whew. No. August
Yeah.
is like the time when the expansion usually drops. Although the last couple they have done, I feel like 2-ish weeks earlier than they normally did. Because because they did the end of last year. They normally come out in like December, but then they moved it kind of into November. And I thought that was for like holiday stuff, but then they also kind of did that again for the first set this year. Where normally, it comes out in like April, but it came out in March. So I don't know.
But that was specifically probably tied to the 10-year anniversary of Hearthstone being March.
True.
So I'm not sure if that is necessarily a pattern that will repeat, but generally I'd say just based on previous patterns, we can pretty much expect that there would be a new Hearthstone expansion in either July or August. And I would expect probably closer to July, since we're like mid-June right now, and it's been a little while since for a previous expansion to mini set, but who knows? We'll find out soon enough, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, even still, hopefully if the new set comes out, they will be playing with the cards in the Masters Tour. We'll just have to see if they're any good.
Yes, good point. They might not play with the most recent set, but they probably will.
How much time will they have? Like if the set comes out like the first Tuesday of the month, and we now know the Masters Tours that they can only have like a week and a half, or is it going to come out like earlier than that? So
also pretty fascinating to just see how things change, like through the majority of the qualifying period. You're going to be playing in a meta that is not the meta you're going to be playing in the championship. So you can be great at one thing and then it changes, and you better be great at that thing too. Or hopefully you weren't that great at the previous thing and you did just enough to get by, and now the new thing, hey, you're great at it. Good luck.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, those high level competitors, though, if they're their goal is to qualify for this so that they can do well and be at the World Championship. And the World Championship's going to be in a different meta. They probably already plan for that. And I feel like all of those players at that level are generally good enough that they can kind of navigate the different metas. I'm not as good at that, but I think the top level players are. It's like every time a new set comes out, it's like the Wild West. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know. People are playing wonky cards, and I'm like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what I'm playing against.
The fun thing is you can get that experience now just by playing against a rogue. What is that?
True.
What? That card exists?
That card's in standard. What? I thought that rotated.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of August, there's other things coming out in August, as we just learned on Wednesday for Disney Lorcana. The set 5 Shimmering Skies was announced, and that will be releasing in August. I think early August for local game stores, and then mid to a little bit later in August, 2 weeks after, for the major retailers, as they've been doing. So that was just announced. It's kind of feels weird because we've been talking, right? I guess the last few episodes that we did record, and then we kind of had a gap, but we were like, yeah, okay, cool. Right? Beginning of June, these sets just came out. We had the Ursula's Return for Disney Lorcana, the Flesh and Blood set came out. And then all of a sudden now it's like, okay, next set. Oh, okay. All right. We're already jumping into announcement of the next stuff and talking about new cards again. Okay. There we go. Diving right in.
Put on the gas. Go, go, go.
Yeah.
Oh, with all these new cards coming out, though, what is one to do about it? How do you know which ones you should play with, which ones you shouldn't? Especially if, Blizzard does the right thing and makes the Hearthstone set come out the day before the Masters Tour. Could be tough.
That's lose your mind testing with every second that you have available before having to play, I guess, if you have no window of time at all. But usually there's a little bit more time than just, hit the panic button and it's tomorrow or something. They get like a week in usually the worst case scenarios. Maybe 3 days actually is probably like the worst case scenario I think we've seen before.
Yeah, or patch during the event. You never know.
Yeah.
This card is now banned.
Oh man, they've gotten so much better at that. I think they actually kind of plan for that not to happen, but that has happened for events.
Bless the Edwin Masters Tour. What a time.
Oh my gosh. No, I love reveal seasons though. I think I'm starting to kind of do personally more like stuff which I guess this ties into the other thing that Dankest alluded to, which if you have not seen on my YouTube like community, where you can make a post, or on my Twitter, I did get to announce that I will be revealing 2 cards for the Star Wars Shadows of the Galaxy upcoming sets. So
Nice.
woo, I'm so excited for that. So
yeah.
I will be putting out my YouTube video next Friday on June 21st. So that's when you'll get to see those. But I love reveal seasons. Like, getting to talk about new cards is usually just so exciting. And I've been doing it for so long for Hearthstone, but trying to do more of it for other games now. And it's so interesting, I think, to me to see how differently everyone looks at cards, right? Because like if you watch for Hearthstone, or even if you hear like in podcasts or on YouTube channels, right, for any card game, people always kind of want to talk about the new cards, and some people might hate them, some people might love them, even the same card, right? You get like totally opposite like opinions on some cards. And then you'll hear people make kind of sweeping statements like, oh, this will see play. And it's like, well, what does that even mean? Like, that's just like such a generality. Like, what are you even talking about with that? So we kind of just wanted to do a bit of like a breakdown, talk about different scenarios that people talk about cards, and maybe tie in some of our own like opinions and experiences when talking about new cards and reveals. And just if you are new, especially to card games, I think some of these games like Lorcana and the Star Wars game have also brought in like new players who've never played card games before. So, you might be kind of unfamiliar to card reveals and hearing people's opinions. And it's so funny. Like, I've been playing card games for
You don't have to say it.
I know.
For years.
Decades.
Years is a
Dude, years plus. Years premium.
Nice.
And it's so funny, like, as these new card games have started coming out, as I think more of these card games have becoming more and more mainstream, I've seen in social media and other places, right, just people that are like making the same statements, and then it's like, oh, this next game comes out, and then it's like, oh, there's that same statement. People will be like, oh, well, I can't believe so and so is saying XYZ about these cards, or like, oh my gosh, how can people not like this card, or I can't. And it's like, yeah, this is how it works. Like, it's never gonna change, I don't think so. Let's talk about this. Ron, I want to hear from you first. What do you think about just like analyzing, and we can kind of take this into whatever directions we want, but what's been your experience with like card reveals and talking about new cards as they're being revealed?
So it's pretty fun to just dive into like this wealth of additional brand new content and things that you've no idea the direction that it's going to go. And everybody wants to have their take of how they think it's going to happen and what they think. And there are some things maybe that are obvious enough that it's like, okay, I know well enough about this game that this card is really good, or I know well enough about this kind of game that like this is not going to be good enough, type of thing. Like, okay, this is way too expensive and the effect's not that good, or this card is fairly cheap and the effect is pretty strong. Those kinds of things you can feel pretty happy about saying, that's a softball, I got this one. And then the vast majority of additional things could range anywhere from terrible to amazing, and nobody has any clue, because it's only good in context of what other things are and what other strategies rise and become popular, and what could be really good one week might be bad the next week because the meta changes and develops to counter it or something. So you have like sometimes just these wild claims, and it's really fun if you go back and you look at like some well-known creators and some of like their either their biggest hits or their biggest misses, where like, and retroactively, everybody wants to pretend like they're a genius or they knew, oh, of course, this card was going to be the best. But you've like documented evidence of people saying, I don't think this card is good, or this is kind of bad, it won't see play at all. Guess what? It dominated. it dictated the meta for like 3 months, you know. And there's like a recording of like a popular streamer or somebody saying, no, this is garbage. And it's just like really fun because nobody can really know, but we all like to pretend that we know.
Oh man, for a second I thought Ron was talking about me, and then he said popular streamer, and it's like, oh, never mind. Oh, he's not talking about me. Just kidding. Okay.
Well, to be fair, dragonrider, you and I and everyone else on the AFG team has ample evidence of being completely wrong on multiple different cards, but we do also have some examples of being right, and that's fun. And if you curate your content carefully enough, you just remove all of the incorrect ones and you publicize the correct ones and tout yourself as a modern day card game Nostradamus.
I don't think there's been an incorrect take. I'm going to challenge you on that one.
See, this guy, he's the Nostradamus. He knows how to hide the bad content.
I mean, it's all of us, right? Like other shows talk about opinions, we talk about facts. That's just how it is.
Got him.
But yeah, with the reveal season especially, like you said, it's the context that does mean everything, because you will see a lot of cards where the text seems unimpressive, but it is just the right thing to fit into a deck as a role player and make something else work. And there are other cards that have incredible effects that go nowhere because there is no deck for them, or they just get eaten alive by a deck that is actually powerful. And it's really, really hard to know. And kidding aside, no one's going to have the right answers for you, but there are ways that you can have a bit more informed of an opinion and have more consistent, correct guesses than others.
I like where we were, by the way, in the previous reveal season with Wheel of Death, because we all collectively, I felt, kind of thought 5 turns is a bit too slow. I don't think this is going to be good enough to see play. And as it happened, the text implied it was 5 turns, but it was really 4 turns, and it did see play. And we thought 5 was too slow. So we were kind of right, because as soon as they nerfed it and said, oh, the text actually should have been this way, and it doesn't work the way that it previously was, and now it's 5 turns, it was, lo and behold, too slow. Now, there's other context there, like they changed Reno, and now you can't run Reno in a Wheel of Death deck, which actually made like the interactions worked insanely well together. Now they don't at all, so the deck's total garbage, so is the card. But that's beside the point. Only focus on that first part where I said that we were right.
Yeah. And
I think one thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go right ahead, Don.
Okay. I think one thing that you've both kind of brought up is the tendency, and I'm totally guilty of this too. But this is where we talk about, like, if anybody's heard the terms like we're rating this in a vacuum, right? Or we're talking about this card in a vacuum. That's when you kind of just look at like, okay, here's the card itself, And then you can say things like, this will be good, this will be bad, right? And again, those are like just sweeping statements that is like, what does that even mean? You know, what context are you applying that to? But as you guys mentioned too, there's also the kind of context of like, okay, maybe by itself, just as an individual card, that card is really interesting or seems good, but maybe in the meta, there's too many things that are just good against it, or there's not a deck where it actually fits, right? So then it's like, that's not a great card, or it doesn't end up seeing a lot of like competitive play or use because it's doesn't fit anywhere, even though it might be a good card in a vacuum by itself. So that's definitely something that I think like over the years I've learned too, is that it's like, okay, you can't just say like, here's just like, it's not black and white, right? There's all those shades of gray. That's like, you can't just say this card's good, this card's bad. And sometimes like you kind of can, but it doesn't quite work like that for every single card and in every case. I've had a lot of cards myself where I'm like, I can see this and this will fit here. And then the meta starts and it's totally not a thing until they make changes, like for Hearthstone, right? Or until the meta shifts where people are trying to combat a certain deck. And then it's like, oh, now that card that I thought is good is like popping up everywhere. So it really does depend on like the context and the meta and what's happening as a whole, and not just like for, you know, because cards aren't individual, right? They go into decks, they go against each other. So you got to look at like the whole thing.
To be fair, you're also a bit of an optimist with a lot of cards too. So like it's fun. I see you talk yourself into, well, maybe this could work in certain scenarios, and you might rate the card a little bit more favorably than it deserves. But it's
Probably,
nice. It's a fun element of the review season sometimes, just to be like, well, there's a scenario where this could work, you know? And I'm kind of fond of going the other way a lot of times and being like, nope, terrible, next.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I've become more jaded as time goes on. But in a sense, too, another way to look at the cards that I think makes you better at figuring out which cards are good is trying to figure out what the cards are for. Because these cards don't just exist. They don't just happen upon us from the great beyond. They are designed. There are some really smart people like Cora Giorgio, like Leo Robles, and many others whose names I'm not going to fit in this podcast, who are putting in this work and making these cards. And they have something in mind when they do it. And nobody's perfect. Sometimes they don't get it right and the card doesn't do the thing that they want it to do. But if you have an idea of what that thing is, you're going to know where to look for other cards to put with that card, how to test it, and how to deck build just a little bit better on day one. And at least for me, when I see a pool of cards, I am always trying to figure out what were they thinking with this? How did this come together? And where does this card's journey start and end? And, you know, sometimes it's tempting to be disappointed when you see a pool of cards that you don't want to play with. But even then, like the way that those cards came to be and what sort of player those are for can be an interesting thing to investigate and find out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that that's a really good point as well to like kind of recognize, is that what kind of player is this for? And that's where, you know, earlier I said you get those like opposite opinions sometimes, if people are like, this card looks really cool, or some people are like, this card looks not great, right? Like that's not interesting. And there's different play styles. Like sometimes cards are meant to be more used as like a control tool or, you know, slow type of tool. Some cards are meant to be more aggressive and used in those kind of like aggro style decks or used in that manner. And people have different play styles. So that might be interesting or not to them, whether they analyze it, you know, as like in the overall meta, this could be strong, but personally they might say, that's not my play style. I don't really enjoy that. So I don't like the card, or they don't want to play against it. right? So they're like, I don't want to play against it, but it's probably a strong card. And there's also, I think, especially as more like online tools and like we have more of this like instant access to these card reveals and people's opinions on these cards across all of the card games. Like I mentioned, I mean, even a lot of these physical cards, right? You have podcasts, you have people doing YouTube videos on them. So you have really kind of a lot of this instant access to people's thoughts and opinions on these cards, like right as they're revealed. And some players are going to look at those in a like competitive format, right? They're going to say, okay, in constructed, in the like top level, like the mode or format that I play, like these will be this way, or I think this is how it's going to play out. But some people, like, they don't play card games for the competitive. They might just want to play with their friends, or they might play different formats or different game modes, like depending on, you know, what game you're looking at. You might analyze that card for a draft, or, you know, for if you're like, hey, we just want to play like some wonky fun games, like, okay, what's the most ridiculous cards like that I can put in a deck? You know, there's some people will call it like they revel in the chaos, right? So like in a game like Hearthstone, where there is a lot of random stuff that can happen, people do really enjoy like, okay, let's just put all these cards that just do random things or create random cards, or, you know, add more stuff. And that's what they want to do. And so cards will fit into that much more differently than, say, a card if you're being analyzed for like the competitive level of play in a very specific format. So I think that's another important thing, is sometimes, you know, just looking at like, are you looking at these cards for a specific case, a specific like format even for the game, and not just like for a certain deck?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. A lot of aspects of the community, you know, don't really focus much on like what this means for the competitive scene. And, you know, the cards are being designed for a broad range, so it's not just like, you know, every card needs to be competitive. And if they were, then it wouldn't make sense, because that's not how the nature of competition works. Like, there's gonna be some that are stronger than others, and not every single card can see competitive play. So there's all these different things and different ways that people enjoy the game. So there's going to be lots of different elements to appreciate. I also want to mention that I like what Dankest said, that these cards don't just come from the great beyond. And it made me imagine, like, what if they could? Like, Yogg has bequeathed upon us a new expansion of cards, and it's just pure nonsense. We're like, oh shit, Yogg did what?
The new expansion came to us in a dream.
Yeah.
That's right. What if we created an expansion based on the going back and forth trying to create a ridiculous one-cost priest hunter dual class card?
Oh man!
And that's how all of the cards are designed.
Oh man, can you imagine? But yeah, like just thinking about it, and there's also just different ways that people react to things. Like, there's sometimes the optimist style of reaction to a card, where it's like, well, I could see maybe XYZ different like cool lines of play or ways to build around this card in a deck that might be fun, and a different way to appreciate like how a deck or a game might work. And then there are other people who might view it in a much more pessimistic sense, like, oh, I hate this card, or I think I'm going to play against this card, and this card's going to beat me, and it's going to make me mad. And then there are people like, oh, this card is terrible, but I can imagine it only ever sees play when Rogue plays against me for 1 mana and wins the game, and that's going to upset me, and so on and so forth. But there's usually like sort of a better like middle ground, where you can expect, hey, you know, these cards are going to see some play in some aspects with the right context, and maybe they're not even good this expansion, but they might be great in the next one with like a little bit of support around it. So there's so much that heavily relies on context in a scenario where we are utterly devoid of said context in order to properly evaluate the cards, which just, to me, it always makes reveal seasons very fun, totally crazy, a whole lot of wild, baseless claims a lot of times from people who don't know what they're saying. So I always try to take it with a grain of salt. And when I evaluate cards, try to bring up as many times as possible. By the way, nobody actually knows what they're talking about. Good luck.
Yeah, nobody. Like, you know, when I was starting some content stuff, that was something, and I still hear this from people. Some people want to do reveals, like, or talk, you know, they want to give ratings to cards or something, and they almost get scared. They're like, I don't want to be wrong, or like, people are gonna, you know, think that I don't know anything about the game, and it's like, nobody does. Like, yeah, you're gonna have, even the pros who are rating cards, like, they're gonna get some wrong, and I think that's just, like, quote unquote wrong, right? Like, because again, this is all, like, when people are giving these opinions, nobody's even played with these yet, right? Like, this is all just like theory. We're just using like theory and like basing it on like, okay, comparing it to past cards and that kind of stuff. So yeah, there is ways that you can kind of analyze and look at that stuff to get more quote unquote correct than like average. But also, like, I've started the last couple of expansions for like Hearthstone. I've started I just add in hot takes, you know, where like sometimes I'm like, I know that this is like totally off the wall, but I just do it for fun and like for the memes, because it's like, it's all just fun, right? So I'm like, okay. I'm like, here we go. I'm like, all right, everybody's in agreement that this card's going to be good. And then here I come in. I'm like, no, this card sucks. This card's going to be so bad. And then I just have to like throw it in there just because it's funny.
Yeah.
And you know, you gotta plant those little seeds of chaos sometimes and have those hot takes and spicy takes. But it's all fun. It's just like, you know, we're not gonna get them all right or whatever, right? So it's just talking about the cards before they come out.
Yeah, and if you're ever afraid
that
afraid that your take is bad, just remember that 7 years ago, we all stopped playing Hearthstone because the Marsh Queen ruined the game. Just if you were a life coach fan at the time, that might ring a bell. But yeah, even great players cannot always get it right. So do not worry about just taking your best stab at it and, you know, trying to improve set to set.
Absolutely. And if you're, it's a funny thing thinking about like getting into content creation, and when you start like, oh, I'm afraid of being wrong or something, or I'm afraid that I'll look stupid if I say this one thing or get this one thing incorrect. And then the longer you get into content and do more content, you're like, well, I killed that fear a while ago. I'm consistently wrong. I'm wrong all of the time. I mean, this is just the status quo at this point. This is what you expect.
That's right.
Yeah. Like,
and
what
then
do you
do
mean
it so long that you turn into me, where you're like, I'm gonna do it on purpose because it's funny. Like,
all right. So while we're here, I just gotta ask you guys, what do you think is the card you've been most wrong about ever? Like your worst evaluation.
Oh.
Because I'll let you guys think, but I'll go first with mine. And I can say that, you know, Scholomance was a pretty powerful set. Lots of good cards. And you can dig up the article I wrote from God knows where and when. But the card that I had at number 2 in the set was Headmaster Kel'Thuzad. And that's one of those cards where in a vacuum, it looks pretty good. But it only ever saw play really briefly at one point at the end of its stint in Standard, and otherwise did nothing. And I think the rest of my list was solid, but that card was not where it belonged. I'll just say that. It was certainly not top 10.
I've got 2. A card that I thought would be amazing that was garbage, and then a card that I thought would be garbage that was amazing. So first one is the good one. The one that I thought would be good was Cornelius something, maybe. I don't know.
Cornelius Rome. Yeah.
Yes, Cornelius Rome. I immediately crafted that card gold on day one because I'm like, oh, this card's going to be seeing play everywhere. It's insane. It's a 6-mana 4/5, but like if it sticks, it keeps drawing you cards and it draws cards at the end of every turn. That's insane. It draws cards at the end of your opponent's turn. What? This is mega broken. Yeah, it didn't play at all like its entire run in standard. Now it's gone. And the one that I was totally wrong about, I wasn't even reviewing cards at this point in time. But like I remember seeing the set and thinking about, okay, what things I'm excited about, what things do I like, what things am I worried about? And I was like, there's one card that I'm totally not worried about at all. There's no way this even affects the meta at all. It was Quests in Ungoro. And I'm like, Quest Rogue? Pfft, no way. No shot. No shot. That's good. It's one of the most nerfed cards in Hearthstone's history, and completely broke the meta wide open multiple times. Absolutely insanely powerful. Whoops.
Yeah.
I was a little bit off on that one.
I mean, that deck was a funny one, though, because, like, I remember also being a Quest Rogue naysayer, and we were right for a long time.
That's a great point, that you can be right for so long and then be wrong for longer, or vice versa. And perception shifts on, did you get it right? Well, maybe you got it wrong in this expansion, but you got it hella right in the next one.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry. That just reminded me of another thing.
Oh, totally. But like I was just saying, like when it came out, the games that it won were like very one-sided and felt terrible. But it wasn't actually winning all that much relative to the perceived power level. It wasn't even a winning deck. But by the end of that patch, there was an actual good list that got found that then started winning all the games and got it nerfed. But right off the bat, like the first decks that people came up with were not the scary decks. And it just took that refinement for the cards to actually shine.
For sure.
Okay, I've got... I actually was also kind of thinking, I'm pretty sure that for that Quest Rogue that I was like, I don't know about this too. So that was one that like immediately popped to my head. But as I'm looking through like some cards, so I have one example from Hearthstone and one example from Star Wars, just to kind of compare these. And I think I already recognize why I got them wrong. So I'm pretty sure, if I recall correctly, that when the Libram cards for Paladin in Hearthstone got announced, I was like, I don't know, these seem like, you know, some of those seem really high costed. Even if you discount them like a time or two, that's still, you know, they're still like expensive and slow, right? Like Paladin wants to be aggressive, and oh boy, was I wrong with that.
No, you nailed it. You totally nailed it. Like, no, like unironically, those cards got buffed so many times before they were playable.
That's true. Yeah. That's true.
You were nail on the head. Like,
but then it turns out that like playing a bunch of zero cost stuff. Wow.
Hey loser, wasn't me. Hey loser, wasn't me.
Okay, so I was gonna bring that up. Talking about AFG. So Itachi, I remember Itachi being like, yes, this card is gonna like cause problems. And all the rest of us were like, what? Like what are you talking about? Yeah. I was very wrong on that one. Very wrong. But that again, I think, so looking at that example, now the one I have for Star Wars, obviously we're getting into reveal season, or we're in season reveals for the second set for Star Wars Unlimited. So there's not as many cards, but Super Laser Technician was one that at first I was like, I don't understand this. So it's 3 cost, it's a 2/1, which just for the stat line, of course, not great. Right? But when it gets defeated, you put it into play as a resource and ready it, which is kind of like adding a mana, right? So at first I was like, that's just so expensive. It's such a weak body. It's easy to kill. Like, I don't get it. And then it's like, oh, once I saw it like in play, and I was like, oh, but you get it as a resource that you can like then use, and like, okay, that's actually pretty good. And I remember thinking the same kind of stuff in Hearthstone about like ramp cards for Druid. I was like, why do you want to do that? Like, you're giving up tempo and you're not really doing anything, right? You're just like spending mana to gain a mana later. Like, what? Okay. But I think one thing that I'm recognizing with these is that is a perfect example of when you analyze a card in a vacuum, right? In a vacuum, 3 cost for a 2/1 seems bad. It's terrible, slow, weak body. What are you doing? Same with like ramp, right? Like, what are you doing? You're paying 3 mana to get a mana crystal for later? What? Okay. But when you look at the overall, context of those cards in a meta, or how those help give you a different resource in the game to then use to get to your other cards, they become much better. So I feel like those are cards that like I probably just analyzed in a vacuum and was like, nah, and like just didn't even think about like their wider impact or their use with other things.
Yeah, good point. So many things exist in context. Like any card that draws a card or gives you more resources to play more cards, technically, sucks in a vacuum, right? If your entire deck was just those cards, you would just draw and gain mana and die because you didn't play anything that did anything. But they're super powerful support cards, so they're harder to evaluate because it's harder to be able to see their impact like right away, unless you get more and more used to like the mechanics of the game and the gameplay styles that currently exist and are available to players. But that deepens your context, which changes the whole way that you view the card in the first place. But yeah, starting out like not knowing anything about like the game or the mechanics or any number of different contextual things, it makes it so hard to know like how is that good? Like Nourish for Druid in Hearthstone. Like what do you mean? You pay 5 mana and you just get 2 extra mana to play like right now, but also later. So it's -3 mana on this turn. And then I have more mana later, whatever. Or I spend 5 mana to draw 3 cards, but they're just going to play minions and hit me. Well, it turns out it's one of the best cards ever.
Or was it? And that's the thing that's fascinating about Nourish, is that it really was, as Tito put it, 5 mana do nothing when it was released in Classic. It was not really played much at all. And it was not one of Druid's strongest cards. But suddenly when you shift the context to the Ashes of Outland meta, and you make Celestial alignment, and you make cards that like Jerry Rig Carpenter that can split it up, and then Nathria comes around, suddenly getting that 2 extra mana is really good because the cards you can play at higher mana cost are way better than War Golem. And who would have thunk it? Nourish just, got the total facelift all off the back of that, just context shift. The card didn't even get buffed. And then they nerfed it, and it was still good at 6.
How about Phylactery in Warlock, or the Mithril Rod that like discounted cards that a lot of people I think evaluated that card when they first saw it and were underwhelmed. And yeah, it was like 3 mana at first, so it had to get nerfed a bit. And Phylactery was so insane at certain points with how you could just copy 1 Death Rattle on a wide board of things with all this other support stuff. I remember people like Pocket Train playing in Tavern Brawls, the Heroic Brawliseum, and just putting in any random Death Rattle just for fun, just because they could. Because it's like, yeah, I'm going to win with this too. Like normally it was just the Mine, because the Mine did 4 damage and you set up OTKs. But he was doing it with like one of the 2/2 skeletons that just did random damage. He was doing it with the clam, the 7/7 that just when it died, it drew cards for your opponent, and he would just be milling people with it. Like it was absurd because just that one card, Phylactery, was so broken. But it was one of those things that not a lot of people on seeing it at first like evaluated it to its actual power level, given the context of everything else that surrounded it.
Yeah, I know that I rated Phylactery pretty highly myself, but that set for Warlock was just not okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're never wrong, so I understand
Well,
you got it right.
well, I can say that the thing that I did that was arguably wrong is I had Mithril Rod as the number 3 card below Demon Seed and Phylactery, because I didn't think that Mithril Rod would go in the good D6 list. I thought that it would use Fair Admission instead, because you didn't need all the discounts from Mithril Rod, because whatever, the admission would get you there faster. Nah, it was the Rod. Mithril Rod was pretty good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
That was definitely a not okay set for Warlock. It was completely nuts.
yeah, like it's the fact that looking back, it's really hard to say what the best card they got is something. Because you get the Rod, you've got the Demon Seed, you have the Phylactery. Warlock did all right.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to define how you're saying like what was the strongest one if you're talking about the context of like that standard meta or the game in general or Wild or something, because
Yeah,
I think if it was just like in general or in Wild, it probably was the Demon Seed, because that's oh my god. But
yeah.
There's still arguments to make for other things too.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's funny looking back at the history of crazy cards. Like I know I think the one that was collectively a really big sleeper, thinking about from like our AFG time, was Theatar. So I remember that Based had it as her most slept on card. And that when we were comparing to the Coin Concede ratings, the community had rated Theatar as the mid card of the set. It was the median card for rating.
Oh wow.
For Nathria. And
that card is a menace.
Yeah, it kind of ceased to actually be incredible once it wasn't 4 mana anymore. But like at 4, like it was as powerful as the effect felt bad to play against. And I think it became more feels bad over time than like actually powerful, but man, it's one of a kind.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right. Well, I think to wind down this conversation, I want to ask, what is your general advice or something that you would tell someone if they want to look at reveals, whether it's like for content or not, even if they're just kind of doing it for like their own personal use or whatever? What would you say? Let's start with Ron.
And just as far as like looking at card reveals, my number one advice is just don't get carried away. Like don't believe all the hype about everything that you hear or see in the first place, and don't also try not to buy into the massive like underselling or bombing of, hey, this card is completely terrible and won't see play either. The best thing to do is just dive in and experiment for yourself. Play some games, play with the cards that you think look cool and might be fun to play with, and then evaluate a little bit later. Give the meta itself some time to settle. Usually about like 3 days to a week is good before, especially for people in card games where they have to use a collection and use their dust and like craft cards themselves. Do not jump the gun and craft a legendary card or something else that's expensive to craft that you think will probably be good, because there's a high chance that you will be wrong. Because nobody knows what's good, and a lot of times the things that look like can't miss things are still actually, they can miss things. There are very rare exceptions. Things like Reno, pretty much like, okay, you can tell like this is clearly going to be strong and it's going to be around for a while. You can probably go ahead and spend your resources in game on that and not regret it. But there's plenty of other things that really just nobody knows. So if you have any kind of limitations, any kind of budget constraints, just wait, be patient.
That goes doubly for card games where you pay real money instead of dust for the physical cards. Those can get wild with speculation when it comes to reveals. And
Yeah. And it takes longer, I think, usually in physical card games for like a meta to kind of be figured out or talked about. And, you know, because we've talked about this a lot, but there's, you know, more games that are happening in like the digital games, especially if something big like Hearthstone, than there is for those physical games. So it takes a bit longer to get more information in those physical games too.
Yeah. And I guess for my piece of advice, though, when you're looking at cards, know your own weaknesses. Like, I can say that as a card reviewer, I am very, very biased against cards that are only good when you draw them on time. And maybe it's because I just don't feel lucky as a person, but I can say, well, I haven't totally missed cards like Belinda, Doc Holliday, the for some other reasons too, the new Demon Hunter weapon. Those are cards where I'm like, yes, that's strong, but if I don't have it on curve, it falls off so hard late in the game. It can't be that great. And sure enough, it is great, even if you can just run one of them.
Yep.
And, you know, sometimes I am more right about it. Like, I know that I was a little bit cooler on Aralon than others, and while the card turned out to be fine, it didn't quite meet expectations. But like with Doc Holliday, I thought it was so terrible. Why not just play Ignis if you're going to draw it late? And it turns out that getting the Staff of the Nine Frogs on turn 3, 4, or 5 is the most absurd thing possible. And will just win you the game on its own so much that even if you don't get it every game, it's worth putting in the deck. And
coin play Doc Holliday, turn 4, opponent plays Viper. Yeah.
Hey, you still got a 4/5 and a 1/1, and they played a Viper.
A game-winning 4/5 and a 1/1. Yeah.
I think you might still be winning that exchange, which is the horrible thing. But
perhaps.
Yeah, it's just in situations like that, like that's my thing. But look for your thing. Do you undervalue cards that give you tempo in exchange for a lot of value, maybe with discard mechanics? Do you look at a card that draws cards and think, oh man, this is great. I have this full hand, but it's so slow it doesn't do anything. Just try and figure out where you are and try not to make the same mistake repeatedly. And yeah, you'll find yourself improving fast if you just keep thinking about it that way.
That's great advice.
Yeah. I also love how we're kind of all taking a little bit different approaches for this, which is great. And I think why this works so well. And I love that we're all like, have these different opinions. That's what it should be, right? I was going to go more of the like, know your, or like, not your audience, but know your goal with what you're doing with the analysis. Is like, are you doing an analysis to try to have like the most correct takes on all the cards, right? Especially like as a creator, are you trying to be like at that pro level and like say, okay, this is it, I'm analyzing with like from all these aspects? Or are you just trying to have fun with it and you're just like, I'm just gonna base all of my thoughts on all these cards on like how fun I think they are? Or are you doing it, to share insight for one specific mode or formats? So I think that's kind of my advice is like, just know what reasoning you have for what you're trying to do with the ratings. And that can change over time too, which is totally fine. As I've said with like with mine, right? Like at first I was like, I can't be wrong. I'm making content, like people are going to hear my opinion. I can't be wrong. And we only saw half of Dankest's face because there's a cat tail in the way.
A different cat.
Different kitty. Yeah, the other one was climbing all over him earlier. I love it. But just kind of like know what you're trying to do with the ratings or with your thoughts on the cards, and that can change over time too, and that's okay. That's my advice.
Yeah, that's a good take.
Very sound.
Your goals shape how you're going to approach it for sure. So as your goals shift, your approach might shift, and nothing wrong with that.
Oh, and it's a beautiful thing when all of those different approaches align in one place. Like with our review for Whizbang, I think that all of us coming at it from a different perspective arrived at the conclusion that Tiger's plushie was the best card in the set. And I think that
Card's insane. I got nerfed.
It was Ziliax, but a plushie. I still I just keep saying that. Like, what?
Yeah.
That just blew my mind. Best card.
The saddest part about the plushie getting nerfed was that Saddle Up no longer can put a plushie on the board for Hunter.
I see where your priorities are.
Indeed.
Ron's goal: compare every card to how it works in Hunter. Got it.
Yes, 100%. And how it works against Hunter. I like this card because
True.
Hunter good. I don't like this card because it's bad for Hunter. Yep. There it is. That's my strategy. That's the full. That's the only parameters for evaluation, honestly.
Right.
So it's me this week, isn't it? Yes, it is.
It is.
So we have come to the end of our show today, and I want to thank everybody for joining us this week. If you or someone you know would be interested in joining us, please reach out to us. You can email us at tccgroundtable@protonmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter, TCCG Roundtable. Use our top pinned tweet for a link to our Discord, or use the link in the description or show notes. You can check out the video version on YouTube, dragonrider TCCG. And you can find us everywhere you can find audio podcasts. Also, if you are interested in getting some sweet merch like playmats and other card game accessories for physical games, you can help support us directly while also getting that sweet merch by using our Inked Gaming affiliate link. And you can also find our esports team, Amber Flight Gaming, on Twitter at AFlight Gaming. You can also find us individually. Dankest, where can they find you?
You can find me on YouTube, DankestDad CCG, as well as Twitch. The YouTube channel is back. We got the weekly uploads. Shorts are coming next week, and new uploads soon. Also, I'm going to be trying to make the Twitch return, so keep your eyes out. And then you can find me on Discord as DankestDad.
Fantastic. And dragonrider, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at DonnieDK. That's DAWNIEDK. You can find me on Twitch and YouTube, and very much like Dankest, going to be putting out lots of content coming up. So stay tuned for that, including those sweet Star Wars reveals. So check that out at dragonrider TCCG for both of those. And you can hear me talking all things standard Hearthstone, specifically on the Dr. 3HS podcast. What about you, Ron?
Fantastic. You can find me individually on Twitter at Ron_HS. And you can find me streaming every weekday, Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern on my Twitch channel at RonMexico HS. That, again, is our show. Thank you, everybody, one more time. And we will see you next time at the Roundtable.